For more of this kind of content you can subscribe to the channel, like the video and leave a comment. The sky didn't break. It ripped. A shock wave cracked overhead and the treetops caught fire. Scott dropped the wrench mid-turn. The engine block he was leaning over jolted as if it flinched. The power cut out. He was moving before he thought. Boots hit the mud, axe in hand. The underbrush tore at his legs like it wanted him gone. Trees blurred. Heat rolled in ahead of him, thick and acrid. Then there was a ship, blackened and sharp-edged, half buried in a smoking crater. Flames ran up its hull like veins. Part of it had sheared off. Midair dragged across the dirt in a line of melted ground, and someone was inside. She wasn't moving. One leg hung from the bent hatch, skin the color of deep moss and straw with ash. Her body was twisted like it had been thrown. Silver blunt hair stuck to her cheek and blood dark dripped from her collarbone down into the firelight. Scott didn't pause. He climbed the wreck, boots crunching glass and hull fragments, and yanked the hatch the rest of the way open. Heat blasted out. She stirred, groaned. "I've got you," he muttered, wrapping his arms under her shoulders. "No," she hissed, eyes fluttering open. "Leave me." He ignored her. Her body was hotter than it should have been, like touching something charged, but she was light. The ship winded core overheating. Scott threw them both from the wreck just as the core, when it didn't explode, it collapsed. A pulse like lightning smashed into the trees, dropping them in a 50-yard circle. They landed hard. He rolled, twisted, kept her from the worst of it. His jacket caught flame. He crushed it with his back. Smoke stung his lungs. "You okay?" he asked, hoarse. She didn't answer, just stared at him, eyes half-lit, lips parted like something else was on the tip of her tongue. "Name," he said. She blinked once. "Beer." He nodded. "Scott." "You're a fool, Scott," she whispered, voice a rasp. "You don't know what you just did." "Doesn't matter." She tried to push away from him, couldn't. Too weak. He stood, grabbed her under the knees and lifted her again. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Cabin," he said. "You're not dying in the dirt." Her head fell back against his shoulder, then quiet. Almost too quiet to hear. "I can't go back." Scott didn't ask, didn't speak. He just carried her, smoke curling behind them as the ship burned like a warning shot fired straight into the stars. Scott's arms were screaming by the time he crossed the clearing and shoved the cabin door open with his boot. Baser weighed less than she should, but every step back from the crash site had felt longer. He laid her down on the couch. The cabin was rough cut wood and functioned small stove radio that hadn't worked in years. Emergency gear stacked by the wall. He grabbed a blanket, water, medical kit, knelt beside her. "Where are you hurt?" She just stared at the ceiling, chest rising too fast, skin sheening with sweat. The silver strands of her hair stuck to her face in wet lines. Her shirt, if it was a shirt, was half melted from the crash, black, tight, slick like some kind of armored fabric fused at the seams. "Hey." His voice cut sharper. "Now look at me." She turned her head slowly. "Remove it," she rasped. "What?" "The suit." "Cut it off." Scott hesitated. "It's bonded only at the core." "Use the blade in my boot." He didn't question it, pulled the curved knife from the small holster wrapped around her calf. He slid it under the suit up along her ribs. The fabric gave with a soft hiss beneath it. Her skin shimmered. Sweat rolled down the curve of her stomach, and for the first time Scott noticed the way she trembled, not from cold. Her muscles were twitching. "Your body's reacting to something," he said. She nodded once. "Earth atmosphere, lower nitrogen. It's hitting my core temp." "Fatal?" "No, just aggressive." The blade stopped at her collar. Scott set it down. Baser sat up suddenly, catching his arm. "I told you," she whispered. "I can't go back." Scott stared at her. "Then tell me why." She spoke flat. "Because if they find me, they'll either kill me or worse, make me finish what I ran from. I was a controller on Zarthos, oversight for energy harvests, class 3 extraction units. Standard across city cores. I followed orders. I believed in what we did." Her mouth curled in something bitter. "Until I found out the lower sectors, our own civilians, were being used as heat sinks." Scott frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said slowly, "they were pulling energy through them, bleeding them dry. And calling it progress." He sat back, breath tight. "So you blew the whistle." "I tried. My words were flagged, my access revoked. Then I was reassigned to a unit I helped build, the prototype armor one. That suppresses emotion." Thought descent. Her hand slid to her side, clutching herself. "I didn't wait. I took it. Hijacked a launch craft and ran." Scott exhaled slowly. "You've been falling ever since." He said. Baser looked at him. I didn't want to die out there, she whispered, but I didn't want to survive if it meant going back to them. He reached for the water bottle, unscrewed it, handed it over. She took it with a shaky hand. He stood. You'll sleep here, he said. There's food in the storage bin and the cabin's locked from the inside. She stared at him like she didn't believe what she was hearing. You're letting me stay? Did you think I carried you out of a burning ship just to throw you in the dirt again? Her voice was dry. You don't even know me. No, Scott said, turning away, but I know what it looks like when someone's been hunted. You don't fake that kind of fear. Just watched as he moved toward the door, flipped the breaker on the wall and powered down the last of the flickering lights. He paused. Then you're safe for now, her voice almost a whisper. There's no such thing. Scott didn't argue. Outside the sky cracked again, far off but not thunder. Something was still moving out there, something that had followed her through fire. The storm didn't hit until after midnight, not a natural one. Scott knew the difference. He was expired. He'd seen what sky pressure looked like when nature was behind it. This wasn't that the clouds weren't moving right, they were too low, too fast, and the air had gone dead still inside the cabin. Baser hadn't moved in over an hour. Scott sat in the corner chair watching the window and her silhouette by the couch. She hadn't asked for a bed, hadn't asked for anything. She'd laid back, eyes open, breathing slow, skin still flushed, not fevered but alive. He heard her speak before he saw her move. They were going to lock me in it. Her voice was different now, not breathless, not pained. The armor wasn't just a weapon, it was a cage. Thought control interface, reactive mood dampeners. It learns how to suppress you better the longer you wear it. Scott turned slightly. And you wore it. They forced the trial run 2 weeks. I broke protocol after 4 days. Thought I could push through. I was wrong. She shifted, sitting upright now, legs curled under her, the blanket half wrapped around her frame. Scott leaned forward. Why give that to a soldier? It's not for soldiers, she said. It's for overseers, control tech, the kind you give someone who will command entire extraction cities because they need to obey. She looked at him now, face unreadable. I wasn't made for obedience. Scott exhaled. So you ran? I didn't just run, she said, voice tightening. I exposed the breach. Scott stood now, pacing slowly across the cabin floor. You told someone. I dumped the data into the ComSpire code, locked it under my ID tag, sent it across the civilian network untraceable for a while, and then they traced it back. Dora, the tag flagged me for extraction. Only 2 outcomes: reconditioning or silence. I wasn't afraid to die, she said. I was afraid they'd make me forget why I wanted to. Scott stared at her, then crossed the room and knelt by the old trunk beneath the coat rack. He flipped it open. Inside an old military transceiver. He turned the dial, tried the channel. Static, dead.
Baser stood now, blanket wrapped around her like armor. Even if it worked, she said, they'd already be listening. Scott turned. Then how'd you get this far? She gave a half smile, cloaking texts. Good for the first 300 kilometers, after that you rely on terrain and silence. Scott eyed her. Why now? Why Earth? It was supposed to be temporary, a jump point. I had a contact scientist exiled like me, she promised. She could scramble the signal permanently. Scott frowned, promised. Bera nodded. Once they got to her first, she walked toward the window, one hand brushing the edge of the glass. Her eyes scanned the darkness. They'll burn this place if they think I'm still here, she said. Then we don't let them. She turned, that same flash of disbelief in her eyes. You're still helping me, she said. Even after this you think I'm doing this for fun? Scott said dry. You crash through my trees, break my power grid, bleed on my couch, and now you're acting like I'm supposed to regret pulling you out of that fire. You don't know what I'm capable of, she said. Scott stepped closer. No, he said, but I saw the look in your eyes when you thought you were going to die, and I don't see a killer. I see someone who fought like hell to keep control of who she was. Then a soft hum. Scott turned the radio, dead a moment ago. Flickered with static, a slow rising tone, or bled beneath it. Bera moved fast. Kill it. Scott yanked the cord. Too late. A pulsing sound echoed once through the floor. The lights died. Generator offline. Baser's voice dropped. They are here. Scott grabbed the axe, tossed her the emergency knife, still stained with coolant from her suit. How long until they breach? They won't breach, she said. Not yet. Zarthenium protocol prefers silent eliminations. 1 shot, 1 vanish. If they are here, they are waiting for the right angle. Scott glanced at the window. Then we move first. He crossed to the back door, opened the cellar hatch. Baser didn't hesitate, just followed him into the dark emergency shelter. She asked. Scott clicked a flashlight. Bootlegger, tunnel found it under the cabin 2 years ago. She scanned the stone. You kept this secret. I keep a lot of things secret. Bera turned toward him. This isn't over, she said. I know they'll track again. I know. Bera stepped closer. She pressed a hand to his chest. You shouldn't have saved me. Scott didn't back up. I didn't do it to save you, he said. I did it because I don't leave people behind. For a second she just looked at him, then low, that's going to get you killed. Scott's jaw tightened. Maybe. Her hand slid to his shoulder. I burn hotter when I'm scared, she said. My body regulates pressure through skin contact. That's biology, not choice. Scott stared down at her. Then don't freeze, he said. I'm right here. She exhaled once. Just release. Then she leaned against him, forehead to his collarbone, and the tunnel lights dim, and old flickered. Scott tightened his grip on the axe above them. Something moved. The hunters had arrived. Scott snapped off the flashlight. Darkness wrapped around them like a fist. In the silence below his cabin, he and Bera didn't speak, just listened. Her body was still against his chest to chest, the heat between them steady and too real to ignore. Then the hum vanished. Scott moved first, pulled back just enough to see her face. She didn't flinch. They are scanning, she whispered. Scott nodded once. How do they track? Residual pulse from my armor. They seated it with trace coating. I stripped most of it, but some stays in the skin bones. Maybe. Can you mask it? I'd need a signal jammer. I had one. It was on the ship. Her voice dropped. It burned. Scott turned and crossed to the shelf against the far wall of the bunker, pulled out a steel crate. He held up a device no bigger than a cigar box. Bear's eyes narrowed. That's military. Yours retired from a team that doesn't officially exist, he said. You're not the first off-worlder I've had to think about. She stepped forward. You've done this before. I've never done this, he said. She didn't argue. He powered the jammer. A quiet whine hummed to life, then dipped into silence. Give it a minute, Scott said. It'll fry any low-range scans near the ridge. Baser stared at it, then at him. Her voice was quieter now. They won't stop. I know they are not just here to kill me, she said. They'll want you to now, because you touched me, because you helped. Scott's jaw flexed. Then they've made it personal. She moved closer again, like her body knew when to shift, when to be still. Scott reached forward and touched her wrist. That helps, he asked. It anchors me, she murmured. My body's adapting to your planet. But it's not instant, and when I'm afraid it spikes. He finished. She nodded. I can't regulate alone. Scott didn't hesitate. He pulled her close again, arms around her back, hand flat against her spine. Her body was on fire, heat pouring off her skin like steam, but it didn't burn him. Like she wasn't built to be alone. Her voice was raw now. I'm not used to this. To what? Needing help, staying in one place, feeling like this. We are not going anywhere, Scott said. Let them come. Her laugh was soft. You say that like they're human. They're not. You say that like it matters to me. She looked up at him, then something shifting behind her eyes, the vulnerability that had been there since the moment he'd pulled her from that wreck. It was still there, but something else rose behind it now, a spark. She didn't pull away. Instead, her hands slid up to his shoulder, gripped the collar of his shirt, and her voice lowered to a whisper. I shouldn't want this. Scott's heart thudded once hard. But you do, he said. Her mouth was already on his before he could blink. The kiss was sharp, heated. Her hands gripped his shirt like she was holding herself together by force, and maybe she was. His arms wrapped tighter around her waist, grounding her, steadying the pulse between them. When she pulled back, her breathing was shallow. Her skin glowed brighter now. Too much? He asked. No, she voiced, shaking. But it's overwhelming. She leaned into him again, forehead to his chest. He felt her fingers curl into his side, gripping for balance. She wasn't admitting she needed. You said you didn't do this often, he murmured. You weren't lying. I've never done this, she said, voice shaking now. Never needed anyone, never wanted to. Scott exhaled. You're not weak, he said. You're just alone. There's a difference. Do you know what happens if they catch me alive, he said. Scott's voice was flat. Yeah, they'll extract my memory, strip my identity. I'll become a tool again, controlled, a weapon for someone else's hands. Scott stared at her. Then we make Sure they never get the chance, she looked at him. You really believe that I'm still standing here, aren't I? You're going to get hurt, she said. Scott's voice didn't waver. Then let's make it worth it. Above them the sound returned. This time louder bass turned toward the ladder. They are circling, testing the structure, but they won't breach tonight. Scott raised an eyebrow. Why not? They are waiting for the signal blackout to drop, she said. The jammer's working, but it'll make them aggressive by morning. Scott checked his watch. 4 hours until dawn, then we rest. We hit back at sunrise. Bass's voice was unreadable. You still think we can win? Scott smirked just slightly. I don't lose fights, I get to plan. She stared at him a long time, then she stepped in again, and kissed him one more time, like maybe she'd let herself believe he meant it. The morning came slow and wrong. No wind, no birds, just that vacuum silence that told you something was watching, not a feeling of fact. Even Bera noticed it the second
they emerged from the trap door. They're here, she murmured. Scott didn't ask how. She knew. He just scanned the trees and slid the safety off the rifle slung over his shoulder. He led her through the forest edge away from the cabin. They didn't speak for 20 minutes. She kept close, not clinging, not panicked, but there was a change in her body. She was standing her ground now, and Scott was the one she wanted at her side. They reached the ravine on the far side, an old bootlegger's hideout. Scott motioned toward it. In there, its off-grid lead-lined walls, old mining slag signal won't penetrate. Baser crouched beside him. You built this? Found it reinforced. I wasn't always alone out here. I can hear them now. 6, maybe 7 there. Close. They're splitting up. Classic Zarian sweep pattern. Scott's jaw flexed. What happens if they find us? They won't talk. First they'll drop sonic charges, collapse the tunnel, bury us alive. She stood. We go now. Scott took one last glance behind them toward the cabin, barely visible through the trees. Then they ran inside the tunnel. It was tight, dark, stale, the air wire of rust and old dust. Scott locked the steel door behind them, embraced it with the bar welded into the floor. You okay? He said. No. Scott turned. Baser, I'm overheating, she gasped. He caught her before she dropped. Not like last time, she hissed. Worse, faster. They're close. My body's reacting to it. My core's cycling too fast. If it spikes. Scott didn't let her finish. He pulled her to the floor, unzipped his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She was drenched. Her skin shimmered with that now familiar glow, but brighter, more unstable. What do I do? He asked. She grabbed his wrist hard. Touch me, anchor me. You're the only thing keeping me level. Scott didn't hesitate. He pressed both hands to her back, skin to skin, feeling the fire roll through her muscles like electricity. She gasped, her spine arching instinctively toward him. It's not just biology anymore, she whispered, trembling. It's you. My system is calibrating to you. That's not supposed to happen. You're not Zarthenian. Scott slid behind her, wrapped his arms around her midsection, pulling her into his chest. But I'm here, he said quietly, and I'm not letting go. She twisted toward him without warning, straddling his lap, pressing her forehead against his. I can feel everything right now, your heart, your pulse, the way your hands don't shake. They used to, he said. Not now. Why not? Because I'm done running too. She cooped his jaw, staring at him like she couldn't decide whether to fight him or kiss him. Then she whispered, you're too deep. I can't take it anymore. Scott's hand slid up her sides, grounding her. Then let me carry some of it. She trembled once and collapsed into him, arms wrapped tight around his neck. Her breathing slowed, the glow dimmed. She stayed there, pressed close to him, heart hammering through her skin. I'm not used to people meaning it, she murmured. He pulled her tighter. Get used to it. Minutes passed. Next time they come for me, I won't run, but I want you there when I stop being a target, she said. Scott nodded into her hair. You won't face them alone. I know, she said. And for the first time since the crash, since the fire, the silence, the heat, her eyes closed and she slept. Baser slept for 93 minutes. Scott counted every one of them. He didn't move, not once, as her body stayed draped over his, pulse steady, breath warm against the side of his neck. Scott kept one hand on her back, the other on the pistol holstered beneath his jacket. The hideout was holding for now, but above them it felt like the forest had stopped breathing, like it was waiting for a cue, a test. She stirred just before the 2-hour mark, jaw tight, eyes still closed, a whisper slipping out before consciousness caught up. Scott He tightened his hold slightly. Her eyes blinked open slowly. She was already sweating again, heat rising through her skin and soft pulses. I was dreaming, she said, voice rough, but it wasn't a memory. Scott watched her. What was it? You, she said, standing over me. Everyone else gone, ship burning, just you. Laughed, but your face wasn't afraid. I'm not, he said. Not of you. She met his eyes, then the glow was coming back, not soft like before. She sat back on his thighs, hands bracing the wall behind him like she was holding herself away just barely. Something's changed, she said. Scott sat up straighter. What do you mean? My core, it's not just reacting now, it's pulling, gravitational heat displacement. That only happens in stress fusion states, usually during near-death events or mating season. Scott raised an eyebrow. That's a hell of a spread, she barked, a sharp breath, half laugh, half groan. Zarthenian biology isn't subtle. Sweat dripped down her neck. Scott's voice dropped. What do you need? Baser eyes locked on his. I need to ground the surge. She climbed off him, stood up, swayed. He was on his feet before she took another step. I'm overheating again, but this time it's not just the environment, it's you. Scott blinked. Me, she nodded. My system sinking unconsciously. Your touch regulates me, your body temp neutralizes the spike. I didn't think that was possible with humans. He stepped closer. You saying I've become your regulator? I'm saying I'm losing control, she said. She staggered forward. He caught her by the hips. You're not alone anymore, he said. Steady, let me help. She hesitated, then pressed her forehead to his collarbone. This won't feel neutral, she said. Doesn't need to, Scott said, already sliding one hand up her spine, the other into her hair. Just tell me what to do. She let out a shuddering breath and didn't pull away this time. Her hands found the hem of his shirt and pushed it up over his chest, her fingers grazing skin like they weren't sure if they should but desperately needed to. I've never done this with anyone, not of my kind, she said. Scott pulled the shirt over his head and dropped it to the floor. There's a first time for everything. She didn't smile, just moved into him, body first, skin glowing now at every contact point. Her chest pressed to his, heat poured off her in waves. He reached behind her and opened the clasp on what remained of her bodysuit. It peeled halfway down her back with a hiss like steam. Her skin gleamed in the low light of the tunnel. I don't want to burn you, she whispered. You won't, he said. I've been through fire. Baser kissed him like she was claiming something. Scott didn't back off. He met her full force, their bodies pressed so close the air between them ceased to exist. Her hands roamed his chest, his mouth moved down her neck, and for a second nothing else mattered. No tunnel, no hunters, no war, just her heat, their connection. Then she gasped, pulling back, eyes wide. Her legs buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground. It's too much, she gasped, clutching his arm. You're too deep. I can't take it anymore. Look at me, Scott said, kneeling with her, his voice low, controlled. You're not alone in this. I'm losing control, she choked out. No, he said, pressing his forehead to hers. You're finding something you never had. Her breathing slowed again. Her skin cooled in degrees. Minutes passed. The tunnel lights flickered once, then again, and the tension broke. She slumped against him, body slack but stable. Scott held her for a long time. Neither spoke. Then, you're inside me now, she said softly, like she didn't know how else to say it. Not just biologically, my system's rewritten around you. I won't recover from this. He kissed her forehead. You don't have to. They're getting closer, she said. How can you tell? Because I don't feel afraid anymore, she whispered. That means it's almost here. Scott helped her
up. She stood on her own this time. What now? She asked. Scott strapped the last holster to his leg. Now we stop being prey, then we fight. Scott grinned. Side by side or back to back, she said, pulling her hair tight behind her head. Either way, no more running. The mine held its breath. Scott could feel it, like the air itself had gone dense around them. Earth pressed in from all sides, packed tight from decades of silence and decay. Base's skin still glowed faintly in streaks across her arms and down her spine, but the pulsing was slower now, controlled, no longer wild with instability. She stood on her own legs, braced, breath steady, but her eyes said it plain. She was balancing on the edge of something bigger than heat. She stepped forward first, her hands brushed his bare chest again, softer this time, not frantic, not sparking with survival. Just searching. You're different, she murmured. Because I'm human, he asked. No. Her eyes didn't waver, because you didn't run. Scott's jaw ticked. Running was never the problem. Staying is. Then stay, she said. She didn't wait for an answer. She pressed into him mouth to mouth this time, with something deeper than fire, and it changed everything. Her fingers slid around his neck, his hands moved across her back down to her hips, steady and slow, like he was learning her shape by instinct. And maybe he was. Tell me what you need, he said, breath rough against her throat. She bit back a sound barely audible. I don't know how to want like this. Scott pulled back just enough to look her in the eye. Then we figure it out together. Base's whole body shuddered, and for a second her hands tightened at his sides. Her breath hitched. She started to speak, but instead she moved one push forward, and Scott was against the rock wall, cool stone digging into his back, but her heat made it irrelevant. She straddled him there, thighs sliding up against his hip, her body pressed full length into his, her voice close to his ear. I've trained in pain, I've trained in control, but this is different. Scott finished. Her head dropped to his shoulder, cheek against his neck. It's not meant to feel like this. Then let it, he said. She lifted her head. You're too deep, I can't take it anymore. The words broke from her like a confession, but she didn't stop. She grabbed him tighter, nails pressing into his back, her breath ragged against his skin. Scott didn't hesitate. He held her through it, grounded her, his hand sliding up into her hair, other arm braced across her lower back. I've got you, he said again, voice lower now all the way. Her body jerked once against him. Not in panic, a wave of heat radiated out from her chest like her core was discharging through contact, and then she stilled. Her body sagged against his, not in collapse, but in surrender. The light dimmed and Besa exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. When she finally pulled back, her hands were still shaking slightly. She looked down at them, then up at him. I didn't think I'd survive it, she said. Scott touched her face, thumb brushing the damp line of her jaw. You didn't just survive it, you took it back. Bera blinked hard. She wasn't crying, she wouldn't let herself, but her voice cracked just once when she spoke again. First time I ever chose someone and wasn't punished for it. Scott leaned in, forehead against hers. You're not a tool, you're not a weapon. You sure about that? She asked, voice unsteady. Yeah, he whispered. I've seen the difference. They stayed locked there for a long moment, breathing together, letting the mine wall cool their skin while their bodies unwound from the heat. Then Bera spoke again. They are going to hit us soon. They've waited long enough. Scott nodded. Already moving, he grabbed his shirt, pulled it over his head, and slung the rifle strap back around his shoulder. We don't give them a clean entry, he said. Tripwire, said I rigged the ridge trail with pressure caps. Bera grabbed her half disassembled gear from the floor, and I planted 2 pulse flares by the northeast tree. If they send drones, I'll fry them. Scott looked at her. You good to fight? She cocked her head at him, something hot and wicked behind her smirk. I just survived mating surge collapse with a human who doesn't even flinch, she said. I'm better than good. Scott returned the smirk. Then let's make them regret tracking you this far. They climbed out of the tunnel together. The wind had returned, but the forest still felt too quiet, like the next move wasn't up to them anymore. Besa stepped ahead of him, her hand out toward the wind, her body already shifting back into something sleek, fast prepared. They are here, she said. Scott chambered around. Then let them come. The first shot didn't make a sound. It felt like a ripple, air folding in on itself somewhere behind the tree, and Scott didn't flinch. He and Bera stood motionless in the clearing outside the mine. The light had changed yellow into gold, into red. The sun was rising, but the forest was still stuck in shadow, like it refused to witness what was about to happen. Bera's hand moved once and pulled a disc-shaped object from her belt. It blinked once in her palm. She tossed it toward the trees. The pulse grenade detonated with a whisper, not an explosion, just light, and then silence. Broke footfalls, 3 of them, one heavy armored, the other 2 fast. Precision movement. Branches cracked, but no voices followed. These weren't soldiers, these were executioners. Scott shifted his stance, one knee bent, shoulder rotated toward cover. 3, he asked. No, Bass I said, her voice tighter. That's just the first sweep. She turned slightly blue, eyes scanning the canopy. They are hunting, not striking. They are waiting for one of us to move. Scott reached down and snapped the pin from a trip wire. Buried beneath the moss. Let's give them what they want. Bera didn't smile, but she didn't argue either. A sharp whistle echoed, non-human coded as Athenian field signal. They were close. She turned to Scott, fast low voice. They'll go for you first. You're the variable, I'm the prize. Stay out of the open. Scott cocked his head. You're giving orders now. I know how they think. She said I was one of them. Scott didn't like it, but he respected it. Then the trees moved a shimmer. Then 3 bodies decloaked mid-motion, one leaping straight from the upper canopy blade out serrated edge designed for internal trauma. Besa moved first. She caught the blade mid-swing, twisting her entire body. With it sliced her shoulder, but not deep. She turned. The impact spun and drove her knee into the attacker's chest. The exosuit buckled. With a hiss the hunter slammed into the dirt. The second one went for Scott. Wrong move. He fired once. Center mass. The impact lit the target's back with a plasma flash, enough to knock the body sideways into a trunk. It didn't kill, but it stunned. He moved in fast, boot crushing the enemy's forearm. Before the blade could lift again, he grabbed the rifle, twisted fire point blank into the helmet. Besa crouched low beside the first MC, dragging a second pulse grenade from her belt. Scott's voice cut through third. She glanced left, still watching. It's command heavy. No, she said, smarter. Before he could respond, a thump rocked the dirt under their feet, not from movement, from descent. The fourth hunter wasn't in the trees, he was above them.